Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're gonna do something that's different, yet something that I do every so often when my buttons are pressed enough to the point where I feel like I need to go on a rant. So that's the type of video you're signing up for if you care to see that. Before we get into this video, as you know, content like this is often demonetized, so I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Adam & Eve. Adam & Eve is America's favorite adult store. Not only does it come with discreet packaging, but they also donate 20% of their profit to help fight the spread of HIV around the world. They also have a 24/7 customer service and have 90-day no-hassle returns. If you go to adamandeve.com and use code GLARE, you'll get 50% off one item and free shipping in the US and Canada. Thank you, Adam & Eve, for sponsoring this video. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see my mental breakdowns amongst other things, but if you follow me on Twitter, that's a place where I have short vents every so often when something is really frustrating to me. I think that's what a lot of people do on Twitter. Recently, something that's really been bothering me is toxic positivity. And it's not just recently, I think it's more like recently it's been bothering me to an extra layer where at this point I just feel like I need to scream for a second, which is kind of what's gonna happen here. Now, if you don't know what toxic positivity is, let me just read a definition. It sounds contradictory, but it'll make sense. Toxic positivity is the assumption either by oneself or others that despite a person's emotional pain or difficult situation, they should only have a positive mindset, or my pet peeve term, positive vibes, explains Dr. Zuckerman, a clinical psychologist in Pennsylvania who specializes in, amongst other things, anxiety disorders and self-esteem. Toxic positivity can take many forms. It can be a family member who chastises you for expressing frustration instead of listening to why you're upset. It can be a comment to look on the bright side or be grateful for what you have. So I want to just preface this that I'm not against people who are positive. Like if you're happy in your life, if you have a positive mindset on the daily, I want that for you. That's ideal. That's great. That's not what we're talking about though. I've always been a strong proponent for allowing yourself to feel certain emotions. Now, of course, not to an extreme. Everything has to be done in moderation. So, you know, if you're in a deep rage, if you're in a deep sadness, I think it's good to allow yourself a period of time that you determine to really just feel it, you know? That's what I do with my sadness anyway. Not my depression, unfortunately, but my sadness. If I'm upset about something, I'll say like, okay, I'm gonna give myself a day to really be upset about this, and then I need to start working on moving on. I think that's probably the healthiest way I can manage things, because if I don't allow myself to be sad or angry or any other emotion other than happy and positive, if I don't allow myself to feel negative emotions of sorts, I'm gonna bottle it up, or in the end, I'm still just gonna feel worse in some way because it'll pop back up. You know, kind of when you internalize things so much that then there's a tiny little thing that occurs and it completely sets you off. That's pretty much what I think is gonna happen. Now, I personally deal with toxic positivity from certain people in my life. And that's not shade, it's no one on YouTube, so I'm not trying to be shady. They know who they are. I've told them about it. I think the people that I know are actually well-intentioned when they do it. Like, it's kind of like when a friend tells you they have a problem and then you kind of want to fix it immediately, so you try and give them all these solutions. When the reality is, sometimes, depending on who the person is, the only thing they want to do is vent and for you to say, yeah, that sucks, and hear them out. Not to be like, oh, but what about this? What about that? Because in that very moment, it feels invalidating because it's like, just listen to me be upset. And then, you know, at a later point, if you have any solutions or things that you think would help, you can let them know. But I think in the very moment, it's not helpful for someone if you're saying, I'm feeling really depressed, I'm feeling worthless, life is not worth going on, whatever things that I say. Having someone being like, I'm sorry you feel that way, do you want to rant about it? Something like that is a lot more helpful than, oh, be grateful for what you have or look on the bright side. Now, mind you, sometimes I do that with myself, right? Sometimes it's helpful to think about everything that you're grateful for. Sometimes it's helpful to think about how lucky you are, to think about people who have it worse potentially. That can be helpful, but it's only really helpful, I think, if you choose to do it yourself. Because if someone else tells you to do it, it's like, okay, there's always someone who's gonna have it worse, the same way there's always gonna be people who have it better. And in that very moment, that's not necessarily a very useful thing for me. For other people, potentially. Anyway, let's get to the rant part here. There's someone I know who insists on the fact that they don't like my content, which is totally fine. No one's forced to watch it. No one's forced to like it. It's, you know, personal choice to click on my videos. Recently, they've been kind of using the toxic positivity thing of saying, you know, you should make more positive content. While I think their intention is good, like I'm sure it is good because they want me to be happier, blah, blah, blah. You know, like maybe if I talk about rainbows, my depression will poof, just goodbye, even though it's been here for 10 years. I don't know. They have for some reason labeled my content as negative, which I don't think it really is. Like it can be saddening, it can be horrifying, it can be frustrating. It can be a series of negative emotions because none of us here want to see people go through pain or worse, death. None of us are here talking about crime, talking about pedophilia, being happy about it. But nonetheless, we're here because it's something that's happening, and not talking about it plays it to the hands of abusers, of criminals, of the people who essentially are trying to get away with their crimes. So for me, it's not negative because, first of all, I'm interested in true crime. And again, that's not because I like that crimes happen. It's because I'm interested in the psychology. Also, because I do think that a lot of the times when we do talk about these horrifying things, there's something to be learned. There's something to be learned about red flags or, you know, what to do in a certain situation. Like I always think there's something to be learned, aside from the fact that it's important to talk about things that are uncomfortable when it's at the expense of potentially children or potentially people who will be abused or, like I said, worse. So I don't really see my content as negative, right? But their entire perspective on all of this was that what I was doing was negative, and like what I was doing was putting out negativity in the world, which, I mean, I can be negative, that's for sure. Like, I don't think anyone's surprised by that. I have a pretty pessimistic take on reality, though I'd like to think I'm just a realist who doesn't want to be disappointed, so I assume the worst. But regardless, they pretty much were telling me that my interests were negative, which is so interesting because it's a kind of side of toxic positivity where it's not like they're telling you, don't be depressed, be happy, but the kind of implication is, oh, if you talked about happier things, you would be happier, which I don't really agree with, but it reminded me of how toxic that can be because it's invalidating not only your own sense of what's interesting, what you like, what you want to spend your time on, but it's also kind of implying that your depression or your anxiety or your panic disorder, all things I have, are centered on this content when the reality is 16-year-old me didn't have a YouTube channel. She wanted to die. She tried to kill herself multiple times. Like, do you really think making videos is what pushed that? So I really don't like that type of implication. But on top of that, it's almost like shaming someone for their interests because you're labeling them as something that they're not. And granted, if you don't like true crime, there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't like anything I covered, there's nothing wrong with that. But the reason I want to talk about it is because also, thankfully at this point, I don't really care. If they want to start a YouTube channel, a blog, or whatever about whatever topics they think are positive, they should go for it. 100%. I have nothing against positive content or lighthearted content. It's just not what I'm interested in doing. There's no problem there though. I don't really want to police what kind of content people make as long as it's not at the expense of other people, abusive, whatever. And I think the reason it also frustrates me is that, like I said, thankfully at this point, I'm past really caring about it. It's kind of like, okay, it frustrates me because I don't need to hear about it multiple times a week. But I think what I really dislike about that is that had this conversation happened at an earlier point, it could have deterred me from doing what I'm interested in. It could have made me overthink about it. It could have made me feel like shit, which it still kind of does because you don't really want to hear that something you're spending your time on is like negative and useless and completely like trash, essentially. Not to say that I think I'm a life-changing entity that, you know, just blows everything away. But it's just kind of like, why would you say that to someone who, first of all, did not even ask for your opinion in the first place? It's just kind of like, I think comments like this not only make people feel worse generally, not my situation, just generally speaking, to tell someone to look at the bright side, to be happy, to not be depressed, to, you know, just go on a walk, drink water. It's like, yes, those are things they can do that can help, but that doesn't change the issue at hand in this very moment. I mean, everyone I know has moments where they just want to vent. That's it. And in fact, I have a friend who, when, you know, her friends come to her to talk about things, she'll say, do you want to vent or do you want advice? And I think that's a really smart way of going about it, just so you know that you're not toxically positive without maybe even knowing it. Because like I said, a lot of the times it comes from a good intentioned place, but it's really just been irking me, especially because I've been seeing it a lot on social media where, you know, you'll voice frustration, and there will be people inevitably who are probably well-intentioned, like I said, who will kind of, without knowing, belittle your emotion by saying, oh, but what about this, this, and this? And it's just kind of like, yeah, those things are here, but people sometimes just need to be upset for a little bit. That's pretty much what therapy is for me, an hour to be upset. Anyway, hopefully this didn't bore the hell out of you guys. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know if you deal with stuff like this as well. I'm sure most of you do, because unfortunately it's a pretty prevalent issue. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the fan art.